What's up guys? Welcome back to Angle Grinders and Ideas. This is my second pit bike video. In the last video, I broke down how to take apart the carburetor, clean the jets, and get everything just kind of cleaned and freshened up if it's been sitting for a while and you had some old fuel in it. What we came to conclusion wise is that the carb, cleaning it and cleaning the jets didn't fix the problem. The bike still ran really poorly, but again, it's a $200 pit bike, so you're putting a little money into it, it's not that big of a deal. What I'm gonna do is order another Mikuni carb. I actually already ordered it. It's a knockoff Mikuni, but I happen to have the same one on my Honda Z50. It's an old Z50 with a Chinese 125 thrown on there. So it's weird, it's got like a reverse shifter, you shift down to upshift. It was brakeless for a really long time, so it's pretty funny. I just put some front brakes on it. It's got like some aftermarket clamps, kind of like screwed in. It's super ghetto. It's fun, it's sketchy. Like I said, forever it didn't have brakes, and I really like that, and it's pretty fast for how small it is. 10-inch wheels, the bolts back out of the wheels all the time. It's perfect. It's sketchy. It's dangerous in a sense. I love it. So without further ado, we are gonna pull the carb off the Z50, put it on the other bike, see if it fixes the problem. If it does, I know that when the new carb comes in, I can just bolt it on and I should be pretty solid. So I don't wanna keep you guys waiting any longer. Let me introduce you to my 1982 Honda Z50.
Hey, way up, la 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 voodoo. I said thank you do magic while I who knew, hey. Way up, la 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 voodoo. I said thank you do magic while I who knew, hey. Way up, la 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 voodoo. I said thank you do magic while I who knew, hey. Way up, la 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 voodoo. I said thank you do magic while I who knew, hey. I'm way up and I'm coming.
So I'm gonna pull the carb off the little bike, put it on this bike, and hopefully we have good results. If we do, I can just wait till the other carb gets here. I'll throw it on this bike and we know we got our problem solved.
So one day, when we get to meet again, I hope.
As you can see, it does not take long. So I got the carb off the Z50. Here's the old one. This is the one that came off this this new Fox bike. We'll call it the Fox bike. That's the carb that came off the Fox bike. So I got this carb on. You can tell it's brand new. I've only had it on the Z50 for like 6 months, and so it's maybe been ridden like 3 times. Anyway, it doesn't leak, and it's fired right up, which is fantastic, but the problem is that it's still revving like crazy. And I don't know if you remember in the first video where it was like wide open throttle, I couldn't even do anything. I just had to kill it with the kill switch or cover this to turn the bike off because there's no way it was gonna turn down in throttle. Like I would turn the idle screw and nothing was changed. But then I realized it's got this throttle on it, and I had a problem with one of these throttles in the past. It's cool or whatever because you got this little window where you can see the throttle turning, but it's actually like pretty stupid. The benefit to that throttle is that it does feel pretty nice, and if you fall, it's a lot less likely to crack because it's aluminum rather than like plastic like most throttles. But the issue is it actually requires a good amount more of your throttle cable at the top to make that curve and to do all that. So generally, if you ever buy one of those throttles off of eBay or I don't know, T-Bolt or wherever you get them from, it needs to come with a cable because the cable will be longer. So the problem that I'm having, here's the slide from inside the carb. This is the throttle slide. I'm gonna set it in the top of the carb and install it as if it was operational. You can see that the throttle slide is almost all the way down. So there's a little bit of gap where air can come into the carb. Now, when it's hooked up to this specific throttle cable, it sits a little bit higher. So it sits like right there, which is basically holding the throttle open. So if this is the max you can go down instead of here where it's supposed to be, if it's sitting here, it's like you're cracking the throttle all the time and there's no way it's ever gonna drop. So I still think this bike needs a carb because of the on-off throttle response and how it was pretty garbage. And even though it was like held open, I could still rev it and it would kind of fall flat on its face. So I'm gonna order another carb, but I need to figure out my throttle cable. So I'm gonna pull this out. And the biggest problem when you try to modify these things is if you like go to cut the housing down, which I've done before. You've got this is the cable coming from the throttle up top. This is where it goes into the slide. When you pull this off, it's almost like a brake cable on a bicycle. It's got a NARP, or not a NARP, but a cable end on it, and it's crimped on there. So I can't really shorten this housing, but that's what I need. I need to take tension off of this thing so it has a little bit more length. What the scary part, or not scary, but the difficult part about this is that when you make, look at these gloves, so good. The problem is that when you try to make this distance longer, so you shorten the actual housing that the cable travels in, if you go too far, you develop a ton of slop in the cable. And you can try to run the bolt out. There's a bolt at the top of the throttle right here. You can try to back that out to gain a little bit of distance in the housing or take up space so that you get rid of the slack. But if you go too far, you can't, there's only so much you can do with the bolt up there. And right now that bolt's run all the way in, and that's the problem. We're still having this issue and we don't have any more adjustment in this housing. So what I'm probably gonna do is try to pull this cable end off, then take an angle grinder and trim around this, maybe like a 1/4 inch. We don't need a lot, like a 1/4 inch down, and then slide this back over it. Or if I have another one from like a BMX cable kit, I'll try to put that on here, and then we'll just recrimp it. You don't really even have to crimp it because all it acts is a stop, and it sits inside this and it stops right here. So it doesn't need to be flawless. But if you try to run it without this, which I've done before too, the cable will fall apart over time, especially when it's at a crazy angle like this coming in. So I'm gonna pull this off real quick, trim it down, and see if we can gain the slide travel that we need. Okay, I'm gonna change direction here a little bit. I was messing with the end of this housing, but all that really seems to happen is it's gonna start falling apart. It's tearing it up, and you can see where it's starting to pull the cables apart. This is like a series of wound cables inside it, and I don't wanna screw with it. I hate dealing with sloppy feeling throttles, and I really don't wanna buy any throttle cable. I'm trying to keep this thing cheap and budget minded. I know that sounds stupid, but if I have to do it, I will. I just don't want to. So we're gonna go a different direction. This nut will spin off. So if you ever cut a bolt down and then you thread a nut off, it like rethreads the end, right? So I'm gonna leave this nut on here because when this threads in, even when it bottoms out in this housing, I still don't have enough cable range of motion. So I'm gonna leave the nut on here, and I'm gonna cut this off like in the middle with an angle grinder. You just don't wanna push too hard, because if I cut this in the inside and fray it, it's toast. Any amount of fraying, it's pretty much useless. So I'm gonna hold this with vice grips, and then I'm gonna go bzz, buzz it, spin it, buzz it, spin it until it's all the way cut. And then I will clamp this, spin the nut off, and it will rethread that chopped end. And then I can thread it back in, and I should gain enough cable travel. If I don't, I can always trim it more. So I'm gonna go slow here and try to not overcut it and have the problem I talked about before, where you develop a ton of cable slop. Basically what that feels like is this will be your motion, but your cable won't catch till here. So you'll have like this garbage feeling at the top of your throttle, and it's just super annoying. Then people get on your bike and the first thing they say is, why does it feel like this? Well, that's why, but we can avoid it if we just take our time with this. So I'm gonna chop it real quick and see if it is going to work. I don't have a tripod set up for the GoPro. It's not really worth showing you guys, just a lot of sparks flying, but I did stop before I went all the way through. So I just made a spot, I threaded in here, it's a great way to hold it. And I just kind of picked a spot and just going around. It's not a straight cut, it doesn't even matter, I really could care less. But it's almost all the way through, and I did not cut through the cable. So when I turn it, see, it broke, right? So I might, I think I'm good. I think the cable's okay. You can see a little nick on there, but I think we'll be all right. Like I said, we're just gonna do it. We don't wanna really screw around with changing all this stuff. So now I'm gonna unthread this part, and then I'm gonna hold this part with a vice grip or a pair of pliers. If you don't wanna scratch it or make marks, like tooling marks in it, maybe wrap it with something like some tape, or just don't use pliers on it. Like I said before, I really don't care. So I'm gonna hold it with pliers, and I'm gonna thread this nut all the way off, and it should recut the threads on the end here, and that should allow it to thread into this. But once I thread this out, it's not just gonna pop right off because the cable is still there. I'm gonna have to unthread this, hold it with a vice grip this way, and cut it horizontally to make a notch that the cable can slide through. Here's a section that I cut out. You can see it's not a whole lot. I cut a little cable relief in it, was able to get it out of the way, and then I was able to thread this back in. I don't know if I cut enough out, but we're gonna go look and see. Like I said, you don't wanna cut out too much. You gotta take your time. This is high dollar shit. So now, you look inside, you can see how much less the throttle slide is up, and that means it's not gonna be like you're holding it part throttle when you start it, which is great. It took me a bit longer to do because I decided to go ahead and swap the bars too. I really just hate these bars. So I put them on this bike. Since I don't plan to really keep this bike, I might as well take the good stuff off of it. But I do have a good working throttle. It's got a little bit of slop in it, but I can adjust that out because I'm all the way in right here. It works, it slides, and it snaps back exactly how I want. And then I stole the Pro Tapers and put them on the Z50. They're a little bit lower rise, but I think they're gonna work better. I have this, like, I made this kind of adapter clamp. It's pretty ghetto. I mean, it's a universal clamp. I just like screwed it on to the base here, the steel top clamp of the triple tree. It works okay, but the bars would slip a lot because they didn't have the width for a clamp design like this. Hopefully they work better on that bike, and then this bike is good to go. But I haven't put a carb back on here yet because I haven't fired up this bike yet to see how it runs. Hopefully it runs good with this carb on it, and if it does, my plan to just get one more of these carbs will work, and this bike will be pretty much done, minus a master cylinder I got to swap on it, and maybe a new rear tire. So I'm sorry guys, I gotta add this clip after the fact. I filmed everything and for some reason I didn't even mention. You saw me modify this throttle cable and get it all right, and then in the next clip, it's got a different throttle on it. I mentioned changing the bars and why I did it, but I didn't explain the issue with the throttle. There is no issue with the other throttle. It's sitting right over here. I just wanted to switch it so this bike had the nicer stuff on it. And even though this throttle isn't necessarily that great, it is better than the one that I had on it. Modifying this cable wasn't a waste of time. I just had to do it because it's working with this carburetor regardless. So I did modify this thing and spend a bunch of time trimming this and cutting it so that it would work on the other bike, but it doesn't matter because they both have the exact same carb. I'm gonna fire it up and see how it runs. It's got a perfectly good throttle now. It doesn't feel too sloppy. I haven't messed with this plate much, but everything feels pretty good. I'm pretty comfortable with it. See if it runs, and if it does, I'll take it around the block. So that was choke on and it fired up okay. We'll let it sit and idle for a second. Maybe I can leave the choke off, but I may have to turn the idle up too. So the idle is definitely set too low. I'm gonna grab a Phillips head and turn it up, and then I'm gonna take it around the block. I'll be back in a few and I'll let you know what's up. That's with a choke on and no throttle to start it. It is really hot outside, it's like 92 degrees. So it runs so dialed now, it's crazy. I didn't mess with the carb, I didn't do anything, I just threw it on. No jets change, no fuel screw adjustment, nothing. So I'm just gonna leave that carb on there and the new one can go on the Z50 and then we're ready to rock. So this bike just needs a rear master cylinder. And I think that's it. Maybe some grips. I mean, I put the shitty bars on so the grips are kind of garbage too, but I'm pretty stoked. 220 bucks plus a $20 carb, so 240. I'll be in this thing under 300 bucks and it'll be solid. So that's gonna be a wrap for today's video. I really appreciate you guys watching. As always, I can't thank you enough. Peace out.